Hi guys, this is Lalana. Thanks for tuning into the Sovereign Path. So today we're going to talk about conditions. This is something that keeps coming up a lot, and I have questions about often in my coaching calls. And so there's this narrative that I get asked about from time to time. And I guess that is sort of being perpetuated in regard to the twin flame dynamic, in regard to the twin flame path. And that is that on some level, this ties into the boundaries video that I just released, that on some level, we as the feminine, not gender specific, is expecting the divine masculine, not gender specific, to show up in certain ways in our physical reality as we are doing the work, as we're doing the shadow work, as we're doing the inner work, and all of these things. And if the masculine doesn't show up in the way that we want them to show up, then we need to set another boundary that's saying that no, you need to show up in this way in order for me to accept you into my life, have communication with you, however the dialogue goes. And so specifically, some of the things that I've been asked about is the friend zoning situation for a lot of feminines that are saying, okay, I'm being told or I'm seeing that if I want to have a romantic partnership with my masculine, then I need to only allow that into my physical reality from them. And if they're showing up wanting to be friends, then I need to sort of, push them on their way, sort of thing, because that's not the type of interaction that I want to have with my same self. And then on the same framework is that it's being like, okay, well, if you're coming in this way, say breadcrumbing or something like that, or, if you're not coming in the way that I want you to come in, whatever that might be, right? I'm just giving a couple examples, whatever way that might be. If the masculine isn't coming in the way that the feminine wants them to come in, then the feminine needs to be like, no, and set this sort of condition, or this boundary. So I've done a few videos on boundaries, and potentially I'll do some more if you guys want me to. The main reason that I want to do this video, I want to touch on it, is because I've had a lot of questions about it, but also because we need to feel into all of these narratives that I continue to see coming across my coaching calls, and I see them in the comments from you guys as well. I appreciate it. Keep asking me your questions. I'll do my best to continue to answer them and do videos on them. So is the narrative of this question, of this dialogue, coming from ego? Or is it coming from the higher self? Is it coming from ego, fear-based programs, conditioning, scarcity, and lack? Or is it coming from the I am presence of unconditional love, acceptance, being in the present moment, being, right? Where is it coming from? And this is always what comes up for me when I get asked this question. And the awareness on some level that there's a difference between placing healthy boundaries and being in a self-loving energy. I just did a video on that the other day. There's a difference between that, and there's a difference between moving from the I am presence that is you, which is oneness. I've done a ton of videos on this sort of stuff. Should you just detach? Should you just cut cords? Setting boundaries and all of these sort of things. We're moving from oneness, right? That's what this whole path is about. It's bringing you back into the remembrance of what you are. As I've said in a lot of videos, you're not becoming anything. You're just removing the masks and the layers that you have been using to play a role in order to experience the 3D matrix and the separation lens of this current reality that we've been experiencing as souls, as the I am presence, right? That's what we've been doing, but it's not what we are. So when we're placing conditions, right, on unconditional love, then we're moving from ego. We're moving from another program. When we're placing a condition that says, no, Divine Masculine, if you don't show up for me the way I want you to show up for me, then you need to go on your merry way. And whenever you can show up in the way that I want you to show up for me, then potentially we can have some communication or some talk and talk about it or whatever. That is the epitome of ego programming and conditioning. If you are in inner union, you will never have to make that type of a choice or have that type of conversation. I can promise you. So this dialogue and this narrative that I've been being asked about has nothing to do with being in inner union, right? It has nothing to do with being in a self-loving, fulfilled, complete wholeness space in the true oneness and unity that you are, right? This has to do with setting a condition based on still running an egoic program that's shifting from the 3D template of how relationships work. The twin flame dynamic will never work in a 3D templated way, in any sort of a, peaceful, loving way that you want it to show up. The 3D templated program is based on egoic patterns, conditionings, woundings, scarcity, and lack. And if we're still moving from that narrative and that dialogue, for example, you need to show up in this way or that, right? If that is the narrative that we are subscribing to and believing in, then we are still running from a 3D templated program saying that if you don't do this, then that, right? It's conditional. It is completely and utterly conditional. And it's not conditional in a place that's coming from love or unconditionality or unity or oneness. It's not coming from conscious partnership. It's not coming from the truth of what you are within as the I am presence and as the higher self. It's coming from ego. It's coming from separation. It's coming from wounds. That's where it's coming from. It's coming from woundings, right? And it's coming also from the narrative that's saying, as soon as the masculine shows up in this ways, I will act in this way, depending on what I'm doing or where I'm at any given moment. So again, it's still placing the physical aspect of the masculine in front of this entire path, right? The more we're placing the masculine in front of the path, which means in front of you, who is actually leading the energy, the more it's going to keep you in loops and circles and patterns and programs and conditions in that way, right? You are removing the masks and the layers and the programs and the conditions that are blocking you from unconditional love, right? From being in the present moment, from being in reverence, from being in grace, right? From being in union with self. All we are doing is removing the masks, removing the layers that have been blocking us from the truth of what we are so that we could experience the 3D. That's what ego death is. Ego death is allowing the masks and the layers and the programs and the conditions and the societal norms and the belief systems to fall away because they were never you to begin with. You were always oneness. So when we're going through the awakening path, right, which is what you're going to be doing if you're actually experiencing a twin flame dynamic, you're going to be going through a spiritual awakening. You're going to be ascending, which means you are removing those layers and levels and masks and all of these sort of things, including all of those conditions based on an old program, based on 3D templated situations of how romantic partnership work. As I've said in a lot of those other videos that I just mentioned, if we're placing 3D templates on top of the twin flame dynamic, like a copy and paste sort of situation, it's gonna backfire because those templates have absolutely nothing to do with you coming back into love with self. They have nothing to do with you coming home to self, home to you, home to God, home to source, home to the I am presence, home to all that is. That's what this path is. It's removing all of those things that we keep trying to place on the twin flame dynamic as if it's some sort of normal relationship. It's not. This is not a normal relationship that you will have experienced prior to being activated to awaken on this path. This is a path about you and you, right? This is you incarnate with you to awaken you out of all of those traps. That's all they are. They're more traps. They're more like, divisive tools that are creating more and more separation, right? And like, I understand the belief system and how that makes sense to the mind of saying, okay, well, wait, Lalana, you just said that I need to set, self-loving boundaries in the last video that you released. And so if the masculine is coming in breadcrumbing and I accept that, then that's not a self-loving boundary. It's absolutely not a self-loving boundary. You're absolutely correct. But if you're saying that the masculine has to show up in the way that you believe that I have to show up based on a program that you're still running based on a 3D templated relationship, then you're not in self-love to set a self-loving boundary. You're in the past, aspect of you. You're in the past energy of you. The past energy of you is still running at that point. So that's not being self-loving. That's not setting a self-loving boundary, right? Saying that you can only show up in a certain way is not setting a self-loving boundary. A self-loving and being self-loving means I'm loving the self. I'm loving me. I'm in love with me, right? I'm back home with me. You can do whatever it is you want to do. I'm not going to judge you for it. I'm not going to blame you for it. I'm going to be the observer, right? I'm going to be in the present moment and I'm going to accept the present moment for what is. I'm not going to force you to behave in any certain way in order for me to allow you entrance into my world. You do you. Whatever that might be, you do you. If it's the twin, if it's anybody, I'm still staying in my self-loving reverence and grace and unconditionality and union. And I have the awareness that if this is my embodiment, then that's what I'm going to attract. And I don't need to place any condition on how the masculine is showing up or how they're not showing up, because I have the awareness. And now if I'm embodying any inner union, I'm not concerned about how they're showing up, because I know that my inner union and my self-love and my coming back home to self was the whole purpose of this path. And I know that if I'm in this embodiment of the truth of love with an open heart and expressing myself through oneness, then that is what I'm going to attract by default, because I am the I am presence, and the I am presence is always creating, whether they're creating from, or whether the I am presence is creating from ego and conditions and lack, or whether the I am presence is creating from oneness, love, unity, and abundance, all of these sort of things. So keep that in mind, guys. Right? It's important that we keep that in mind, because, this comes across my field a lot in regard to, okay, well, they're showing up, as just wanting to be friends with me, or they're showing up of just wanting to be in a casual situation with me and whatever else. And so, I need to hold my boundary on this and whatever, and they can only show up in this certain way and all of these sort of things. Again, we're moving from a 3D template when we're saying these sort of things and when we're believing these sort of things. I'm not implying that you just let the twin in and out and you're just like a doormat and a revolving door and they can do whatever they want and you're just accepting of that. That's not what I'm implying. What I'm implying is that if you're still focused on what the masculine is doing in general, if you're still setting conditions and conditions and rules to where you have to do all of these things in order for you to come into my life, then you're not focused on you at all. That's the issue with it. Then you're still focused on them. You're still focused on how the dynamic is showing up physically. You're still focused on, well, if they're doing this, then that, instead of focused on, no, if I'm doing this, then that. Not if they're doing this, then that. You don't need to be concerned about what they're doing, right? The thing is that this narrative, and it just keeps going round and round and round, and the focus keeps being placed in the wrong direction. This is not a within path. It's an as within, so without path. Regardless of you're a twin or you're not, that's how this entire reality works. Whatever you're holding within you, you are going to attract. That's it. Whatever you're holding within you, you're going to attract. So if we're placing all of these, conditions, and they have to do all of these things and jump through all of these hoops in order to, like, you know, be worthy of my presence now, then you're literally running from an egoic program, right? And you think potentially that you're setting a healthy boundary in that way, but you're still placing the focus on the externality, how it shows up, what you're going to do if it shows up in that way, and, you know, all of these things. So your focus is outward. The focus on this path can't be outward. And I understand when you're in the throes of the bubble love phase, when you're in the throes of the dark night, it feels like it's got to be placed outward, but you will shift out of that. That's why most of my content is about the latter half of the twin flame dynamic. Because the latter half of this is when you start to actually get a grip on what's going on here, right? And you start to understand that this path is about bringing you back into love with self. And the more you start to get that grip and you start embodying love for self, the more you have the awareness of you don't need to be concerned about what's going on in the external world, because you are the creator of your external world from within. Not from conditions that are coming from the ego-based programs that are saying, I have to do this and this and this and this and this. No, you have to remove this and this and this and this and this that is blocking the light that is you, that is blocking the oneness that is you, that is blocking the union that is you, that is blocking the love that is you, that always has been you. You create from this space, right? You attract from this space. So as long as you're in a space that's still saying the masculine has to do all of these things in order for X, Y, and Z and all of this stuff, then you're still moving from separation consciousness. You just are. You're still moving from that place. We need to get in the place that we have the awareness and the embodiment that you are inner union, that you've always been inner union, that you are love, that you are abundance, that you are joy, that you are complete, fully, wholly complete on your own, just you. This is it. You are the I Am Presence, experiencing itself in form in myriad of different ways, right? So let me go back to, okay, so the twin shows up, right? The twin's breadcrumbing me again. The twin's doing this and that again, right? So the question isn't, what do I do in these moments, and do I let the twin in these moments, and, you know, like I said, that self-loving boundary. The question isn't, okay, you have to show up in this way, or potentially now they're showing up in more divinity, and you're like, okay, great, but then you shift back out of, you know, the potential of you being in balance, you being in center. Why? Because you had an attachment to how they were showing up, and you were feeling like, oh, I must be doing the work now because now they're showing up, and so you slipped back into the expectation of what that means. Right? The thing about inner union, the thing about this path, the thing that this entire path is leading you back to the truth of what you are, is that it's going to drop every single tool that potentially you have been learning or have been trying to figure out on how and what to do to attract the masculine back into your life, including manifesting them, which I'm going to do another video on that. It doesn't work like that. The twin is you. They're not outside of you. And so as long as you keep seeing them as outside of you, and they need to show up in all of these different sort of ways, they will continue to show up in all sorts of ways that you don't want them to show up, because you haven't come into union with self, right? You haven't come into the embodiment of your love again. You haven't come into the remembrance that you are the I Am Presence, and not mentally, but the embodied. Sorry, my little timer went off. So, you know, this is a really, really important one. And I hope that I hope that this is clear, because I don't want to confuse you guys between needing to set healthy boundaries and sort of being an open door. I hope that I'm making sense and it's clear what I'm saying in this video. Setting healthy boundaries is extremely important, but the boundaries are about you. They're for you. They're to remember that you are love. They're to remember that you are love, and that you're not bending yourself sideways and backwards. Setting healthy boundaries is about the awakening process. It's about opening your heart space. It's about coming back into the remembrance of what you are. It's about aligning to the higher self, right? The embodiment of the truth of the higher self. It's about being in that place of saying, I'm not going to like bend myself backwards in order to be people pleasing, or in order to like appease the twin in some way, in order to show up for them in some way so that I can be validated. And so what we're looking at in the narrative that I'm speaking about in this video is basically the same thing as that. And that is saying that you want the twin to show up in certain ways so that you can be validated by them. And so if the twin isn't showing up in these certain ways, then it's not validating you, right? All of that narrative needs to be dropped on this path, because it's going to backfire, and it has nothing to do with coming into higher consciousness. It has nothing to do with coming into inner union. It's still separation, and it's still a block, and it's still a condition, and it still has something to do with a wound and a program, right? It doesn't have anything to do with being unconditionally loving and being in your love. Being in your love and in your inner union, fully embodied in that place. As I've said before, you're not going to be concerned about trying to set any conditions or saying that you need to show up in this way or X, Y, and Z. It just does not work like that. You are not going to be embodying that narrative anymore. It will no longer be part of your vibratory resonance. It will no longer be a part of your experience. Once you come into inner union, your experience is love. Not romantic love, although you can have that, but the true essence of love. Love as the existence of creation, right? Love as the embodiment of what you are. The I am presence of what you are, and not the mental concept that I keep hearing everywhere about the I am presence. No, the true I am presence, the embodiment of what you are, what you come back into, what you remember when you're going through a true spiritual awakening path, is coming back into the remembrance, and then therefore the true embodiment of the I am presence that is you, of higher consciousness that is you, of the light of awareness that is you. When you are embodying the truth that is you again, you will not be concerned about the twin breadcrumbing or friend zoning or casualing or third partying or any of those things. And I know that that sounds like a really foreign concept if we're in the throes of those things. And I know that those things are painful as well. But have the awareness that that stuff is simply not going to be affecting you anymore as you move through this process and come into inner union. It will not be affecting you anymore. So if you're still in the place of trying to set these conditions and these definitions of how this works and how you have to show up and all of these sort of things, have the awareness that those are moving from 3D templated programs. And the 3D templated programs have they have nothing to do with awakening. They have nothing to do with awakening. They have nothing to do with the twin flame path other than the fact that your twin flame is reflecting them back to you so that they can be eradicated, right? You can't take this stuff with you as you ascend. These are lower vibrational, fear-based energies. They can't come with you, right? So hopefully that makes sense. You know, guys, inner union, which you will all get to if you're truly experiencing this path, because that's what this is. You're going to continue to expand, as I said. You're going to continue to grow and evolve and ascend and all of those things. It doesn't end in inner union, but inner union is the embodiment, the true embodiment of the I am presence. It's the true remembrance of your higher awareness that you are. And when you're in that place, as I said, you're going to be attracting what you are, not because you're trying, not because you're trying to manifest things, because all of that still is coming from scarcity. It's all still coming from lack and thinking, I don't have this, and so I need it. And so let me try to attract it or whatever else. All of that stuff is still coming from scarcity. When you are fully and embodied in your love again, when you're fully in remembrance of what you are again, you will see that you just naturally attract love into your life. because that's what you are, not because you're trying, and not because you're like setting some sort of rules and boundaries around how the twin has to show up and how they don't have to show up in regard to how you're wanting them to show up based on a 3D program of how, you know, the relationship with them, you're wanting that to look and you're wanting that to work, right? We're dropping those narratives. Those are programs. They're not going to work. It's not how conscious partnership works, and that's what we're creating as we're moving into New Earth. That's what we're creating as we're shedding all of these other layers off and we're remembering the truth of what we are. So hopefully that resonates, guys. Hopefully that makes sense. I certainly don't want to confuse anyone, because this isn't about not setting healthy boundaries, but it is about still having expectations and attachments to how the twin shows up based on an old narrative, based on an old program of how potentially you want romantic partnerships to work. So really feel into that. You are attracting what you are. It's just what it is. It's always what it will be. As within, so without. So if you're fully in your love and your embodiment and your higher consciousness, that's what you're going to see show up in your world. And if you're still focusing on the external, you know, masculine and what they're doing, and I have to do this to do that, then that's what you're going to continue to create. And that's how we stay in those loops and wondering why we're not really moving forward, or I've been in inner union and then I keep shifting in and out. Because as long as the physical aspect of the masculine is, you know, your focus and you're trying to like finagle all of these things, the more you're going to stay in separation consciousness, and the more you're going to be wobbling up and down and all of these sort of things, right? Just come back home to you. That's all this path is asking. It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Come home to you. Everything else will fall into place after that. Okay? Keep the focus on you. Keep the love on you. This is your path. You're walking it. You're leading it energetically. Remember that. You're leading it energetically, and not from ego and programs and conditioning, but from love, from the truth of what you are, right? It's the remembrance of the truth of what you are that this path is all about. So that's what I have for you guys. I hope you have an awesome day.